He held the papers aloft, the camera flashes glinting off the presidential seal. "They call it diplomacy," his voice boomed, dripping with contempt. "I call it a surrender document, and I'm here to tell you who was ready to sign it in secret." The air in the Grand Summit Hall in Charlevoix, Canada, was thick with the scent of old wood, fresh coffee, and suffocating hypocrisy. 7 of the world's most powerful leaders sat around a polished mahogany table, the picture of global unity. But Donald Trump saw through the facade. He saw the polite smiles that masked predatory intentions, the handshakes that were merely preludes to a pickpocketing. For hours they had lectured him. The German chancellor, her face a mask of stern disappointment, spoke of global responsibilities. The French president, oozing a practiced and condescending charm, spoke of the spirit of the alliance. They all spoke of unity, but their definition of unity was simple. America pays the bill, and they reap the rewards. The document at the center of the table was the reason for his presence, and the reason for his imminent departure. The Trans-Oceanic Partnership Agreement, they called it. A masterpiece of bureaucratic language. It ran for hundreds of pages, each one a nail in the coffin of the American manufacturing industry. "So, we are in agreement, Donald?" the French president asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Trump leaned back in his chair, letting the silence stretch. He looked from one face to the next, locking eyes with each leader. He wasn't angry. He was something far more dangerous. He was resolved. "No," he said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the room's stale diplomacy. "We are not." A collective intake of breath. The German chancellor's jaw tightened. "This agreement," Trump continued, tapping a single finger on the bound document, "has a clause on page 187 that nullifies our steel tariffs. It has a section on page 245 that establishes a carbon tax to be paid disproportionately by American companies that will fund green energy projects in Europe. And my favorite part is the footnote on page 312, the one you all hope nobody reads, which creates a new international tribunal, staffed by your appointees, with the power to fine American businesses for non-compliance." He pushed his chair back and stood up. The scraping sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. "You're not talking about partnership. You're talking about plunder. You're talking about stripping my country down for parts, and I won't have it. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not the elites of Paris." He straightened his tie. "So no, we are not in agreement. Gentlemen, madam, enjoy your breakfast." With a final, decisive nod, he turned and walked out, leaving a tableau of stunned and sputtering world leaders in his wake. Air Force One was waiting. The moment the wheels were up, the media onslaught began. It was a coordinated, instantaneous assault, a digital blitzkrieg aimed at framing Trump's exit not as a principled stand, but as a childish tantrum. In a sterile studio in Washington, D.C., Chuck Todd adjusted his glasses, his face a portrait of grave concern. "An unprecedented moment of chaos," he intoned to his viewers. "President Trump has, in a single impulsive act, thrown the G7 into disarray and isolated America on the world stage. We're seeing a president who is simply not fit for this level of diplomacy, a bull in the china shop of global order." Miles away, in a sleek New York studio, Mehdi Hasan was even more venomous. His voice dripped with scorn as he stared into the camera, a prosecutor addressing a jury he already knew was on his side. "Let's be clear what this is," Hasan began, his hands slicing the air for emphasis. "This is weakness masquerading as strength. It is an admission of failure. Trump couldn't negotiate, he couldn't lead, so he ran away. He has abdicated America's role as the leader of the free world, all for a cheap, jingoistic applause line back home. It's pathetic. It's dangerous. And his supporters are cheering on the sabotage of their own country's influence." Behind the scenes, the coordination was seamless. A text from Todd's producer to Hasan's. "We're hitting the chaos angle hard. You?" Hasan's producer replied instantly. "We're on isolation and weakness. It's a pincer movement. He won't know what hit him by the time he lands." They painted him as a fool, an isolationist, a wrecking ball. The narrative was set before Air Force One had even crossed the Canadian border. They believed they were writing the history of the day in real time. They were certain they had him trapped. Aboard the presidential plane, the atmosphere was tense. Aides scurried back and forth. iPads glowing with the latest headlines and chyrons from the cable news networks. "Trump in chaos," one read. "America alone," screamed another. A young, ambitious Deputy Chief of Staff, Mark, entered the president's private cabin. Trump was staring out the window at the vast expanse of clouds below. A Diet Coke untouched on the table beside him. "Mr. President," Mark said, his voice strained. "It's bad. Todd and Hasan are leading the charge. They're painting this as a catastrophic failure. The narrative is setting like concrete." Trump turned from the window, a small, unreadable smile on his face. He looked utterly untroubled. "The narrative, Mark? Whose narrative? Theirs?" He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Let them build their sandcastle as high as they can. Let them scream from the top of it. They're so busy talking, they never think to look what the tide is doing." He picked up a slim, unmarked folder from his desk. It was bound not by a government seal, but by a simple rubber band. "They think this is a street fight," Trump said, tapping the folder. "They think it's about who can shout the loudest. They don't understand. This is about leverage. It's about truth. They're playing checkers on a board where I've already put them in checkmate." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a predatory fire. "Schedule a press conference for the moment we land. East Room. I want every camera in the world to be there, especially theirs." Mark, looking at the president's unshakable confidence, felt the anxiety in his chest begin to recede. He didn't understand the plan, but he understood the man. This wasn't a retreat. It was a counterattack in motion. The East Room of the White House was a shark tank. The press corps was packed shoulder to shoulder. A buzzing, agitated mass of hostility. They could smell blood in the water. In the front row, Chuck Todd sat with an air of smug satisfaction, whispering to a colleague. A few seats away, Mehdi Hasan was scrolling through his phone, a smirk playing on his lips, no doubt reading his own columns, praising his prescience. The door opened, and President Trump walked to the podium. He didn't look beleaguered or defensive. He looked energized, like a heavyweight champion entering the ring for a title defense he knew he was going to win. The room erupted in a cacophony of shouted questions. "Mr. President, why did you sabotage the G7? Do you have a response to leaders who call you an isolationist? Will you apologize for weakening the Western alliance, sir?" Trump held up a hand. The noise subsided, but the tension remained, crackling in the air. He scanned the room, his eyes briefly finding Todd's, then Hasan's, before settling on the central camera at the back of the room. He was bypassing the media filter. He was talking to the people. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice calm and powerful. "I've just returned from Canada, where some of our so-called allies presented me with a deal. A deal they told you, through their friends here in the media, was about partnership and unity." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "That is a lie." The room went dead silent. "I'm not going to bore you with the 400 pages of globalist nonsense they tried to push on us. I'm just going to tell you what it would have done. It would have sent your jobs overseas. It would have punished our energy companies while rewarding foreign polluters. It would have taken money from your pockets to fund the pet projects of European bureaucrats." He leaned into the microphone. "They wanted America to sign a document of economic surrender, and I refused." Chuck Todd started to raise his hand, his mouth open to ask a condescending question. Hasan looked poised to pounce. Trump ignored them completely. "Now, the people in this room and their bosses have spent the last 8 hours telling you I'm a fool, that I'm impulsive, that I've weakened America." He smiled a sharp, dangerous smile. "They want you to believe that the leaders I met with are unified in their disappointment with me, that they are all noble statesmen who were shocked by my behavior." He reached inside his jacket and pulled out the slim, unmarked folder. He unwrapped the rubber band. "This," he said, holding up a sheaf of papers, "is a transcript of a private prep call between the French trade representative and the German finance minister from 2 days ago. It was given to me by a patriot in their delegation who believes in fair trade, not fixed trade. I'm going to read you a little passage." He put on his reading glasses. The only sound in the room was the clicking of camera shutters. Todd and Hasan stared, their faces frozen in disbelief. "The German minister says, and I quote, The Americans will never read the footnotes on the carbon tax. Their media will be so focused on Trump's personality, the substance will be irrelevant. We can pass the costs directly to their manufacturing sector. Trump looked up. Nice, he continued. The French representative replies, and again I quote, exactly. And he will be painted as a buffoon for walking away from such a unified front. We have already spoken to our contacts at several American networks. They are prepared to frame it as an American failure the moment he objects. He took off his glasses and placed the papers on the podium. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a trap being sprung. They call it diplomacy, Trump boomed, his voice resonating with righteous anger. I call it a conspiracy against the American worker. They didn't just write a bad deal. They colluded with people who would rather report fake news than report the truth about a rigged system designed to make you poorer. He looked directly at Chuck Todd, whose face had gone pale. He looked at Mehdi Hasan, who was staring at his shoes, the smugness completely erased from his face. Any questions about the substance? Trump asked, his voice dripping with ice. No one spoke. For the first time, the Washington press corps was speechless. They had been exposed not just as biased, but as willing pawns in an international scheme. Trump nodded slowly. That's what I thought. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving a crater where the media's narrative used to be. That evening, the cable news shows were a study in desperation. Chuck Todd, his voice lacking its usual authority, tried to pivot. While these documents are certainly concerning, they don't change the larger picture of an American president alienating our allies. But his words were hollow. The clip of Trump reading the transcript was playing on a loop on every social media platform. Mehdi Hasan attempted a different tactic. Outrage. This is a flagrant abuse of power, using intelligence to attack our allies and the free press. But he sounded shrill, defensive. He wasn't a prosecutor anymore. He was the one on the witness stand, and he had been caught in a lie. In the Oval Office, President Trump watched their flailing on a muted television. The hashtag #G7 Gambit was the #1 trend in the world. Polls were already showing a massive surge in his approval ratings. He had not just won, he had dominated. He had exposed the globalist game and the media's role as its cheerleaders in a single, brilliant stroke. He took a sip of his Diet Coke, a flicker of a satisfied smile on his face. The tide had come in, and the sandcastle they had built so arrogantly had been washed away, leaving nothing but the bedrock truth he had laid bare for all to see. Was Trump's press conference a masterclass in political strategy, or did his opponents simply reveal their own hand? Share your take on the story's climax in the comments below, and if you enjoy content that challenges the official narrative, be sure to subscribe.